Hi, Charlie. Harry Falk.
Eric, how are you? Good to see you. Thank
That's
you.
set up there.
Oh, wow, I wasn't prepared for a, whatever this is. Hi. So, your council members and Vice Mayor, okay? So how do you, so, city manager, okay. So how do you want to go with this evening?
Well, what I want to do is I want to hear about what the city could do to try to enhance our broadband opportunities in this area, and also with all the American Rescue money that's coming in now, and so forth. How can we work off of that to try to get better service for our citizens here?
Sure. We can do that. We're a small group here. Do I need to be here? Can I sit at the table?
I just asked maybe talk around the microphone that way because we're live streaming it. Citizens of Clarksburg.
Sure. Happy to do that. Well, right now, the state of West Virginia has about $135 million that's set aside for broadband in I believe that was the America Rescue Plan that was in. And Secretary Carmichael has devised a plan for that money, and they're going to put that in some different buckets. Some of that money will be used to give to the existing carriers to expand their service into areas that don't presently have service. And I think that there's been, not sure all the rules are in place there yet, and all the application things haven't been finalized, but fundamentally there'll be I'm going to call it a bounty for lack of a better term, that will be paid for each connection that we have. And Secretary Carmichael's vision on this is to expand to as many customers as we possibly can, as quick as we possibly can. So part of that money will be used to incentivize carriers to build out to additional customers. Some of that money will be used as matching money for programs that have some grants that are available from different places. Typically, those are going to be from the USDA or maybe the ARC or the NTIA, which is the Division of Commerce Department, and they'll be using that as match money. And then there'll be some other money that is going to be available just for municipalities that may want to start some sort of a connection of their own. Now, I understand with the money that's coming down in the next tranche, I think there's going to be one that's released here very soon, and then I think another tranche comes in about a year from now. And that can be used for broadband as well, but there are some bumpers on that. And that is supposed to go to build to underserved areas. And the FCC has defined broadband as 25 by 3, and the Treasury Department does 25 megs down and 3 upload. And the Treasury Department has adopted that standard that municipalities and other political subdivisions can do pretty much as they please with that to expand broadband into what they call the unserved areas, meaning that it's got to go to some place where service isn't presently available for 25 megs down and 3 megs up. And there are some nuances to that. It talks about reliability, and it talks about a thing called latency, meaning that's a quality of service issue. So it's got to be, you've got to be covered by good wireline carrier broadband 25 by 3 before that money becomes available. If you're already there, the money won't be available for that. Is the present rules. Those aren't the final rules. That's still open for comment.
What now for what I'm hearing, again, you can tell me if I'm misunderstanding, that so if Clarksburg has certain areas of the town that presently does not meet that 25-3 standard, then the city could, in theory, use some of the money to bring it up to that standard.
Those are presently the rules, as I understand them, yes.
Okay. And as far as reliability goes, what's the reliability standard? Like, how reliable is reliable?
That's a really good question. And I'm not sure how Treasury is going to define that. I'm sure that they'll develop some standard for that, but I couldn't tell you what that is right now.
Because I can tell you personally that I don't think I ever get the internet speed that the internet company says I'm getting. So.
I hear that complaint on a daily basis, and our field verifications that I have done personally in other positions bear that out in many cases, yes.
Is there going to be a way if, let's say the city decided to go in this direction theoretically,
Mm-hmm.
would there be a way for the city to do some kind of testing to determine where the underserved areas are based on actual service and reliability versus whatever people say it is?
Well, I can tell you, to my knowledge, there's no formal standard for that. But one of the best ways to do that is for your citizens to take the speed test. If you go to the website, and I'll get you that address. If you go to the website for the West Virginia Broadband Council and take the speed test, you'll know. So we capture that data. It's performed by a company called Ookla, O-O-K-L-A, I believe is the name of the company. That's sort of the gold standard for what people accept as a reliability test. And that will tell you the speed up, the speed down, and the latency. So if you had people who went from one end of a road or a block to another and everybody took that speed test, and when they take it, they can print that out from their own devices, or they can record that in some fashion. And we'll capture that data as well. And if it proved that you weren't getting the service that you're supposed to be getting and it's below 25/3, I think you could make a case.
There'd be a way, since you all are capturing the data as well as the local user, would there be a way for you to aggregate the data, like, not, strip out the identifiable information, just give us like zones like this area here doesn't have broadband that meets the standards of reliability and speed, whereas maybe this area over here does, generally on a map.
I believe we could.
That may be something that the city would be interested in.
I believe we could make that happen for you.
Okay. I don't want to ask all the questions. What other questions do you all have?
How would we, assuming that the city would be eligible, so how would we fund to the city? Grant, application, would have to be a complete study, submitted, how would that work?
Well, I think you would have to define which bucket of money we're talking about. If we're talking about the American Rescue Plan money that's going to be coming down soon, it's my understanding the Treasury is just going to send the municipalities a check, and you'll be responsible for how that money is administered. And I believe if you're looking for guidance on that, I would check with the auditor's office, check with J.B. McCuskey's office, and see how that would want to work. If you're looking for a grant of some sort from the money that the state presently has of the $135 million, I'm pretty sure you're going to be applying that to the Office of Broadband. And I don't believe that our application process is complete for that yet. I expect it to happen very soon, but it's still incomplete.
Okay, if we found an area that was met the requirement of the download and upload speed, then would it be the municipality's responsibility to find a carrier who could provide that service to that area? How would that work?
I believe it would be your responsibility. believe we could give you some guidance on that. I mean, I'm sure that you know who the carriers are in this area, and I think you'd be free to pursue whatever you need.
I attended last week or the week before a meeting at the county commission.
Mhm.
And they brought in Frontier.
Mhm.
And Frontier is rolling out 1 gigabyte of high-speed internet starting in July to 9,000, both business and residential throughout the city of Clarksburg. So I think if they're saying it correctly, then they would be providing a lot of high-speed internet availability at reasonable prices. But I looked at the 1 gig price, like $79 a month, which is pretty reasonable for a business or a residential.
It is indeed. That's very impressive.
And the next tier down was like 59 something, and that was, I forget how many, it was pretty good stuff, if they're true in what they're putting out.
Sure. Did they happen to mention what the upload speeds were?
I didn't catch it.
Okay.
Yeah, I know that they're, because we had the representatives from Shinston come in, and they're looking at the Shinston area being in about 2022. They're talking Clarksburg, 2021 July, that they're rolling out. They have different boxes, locations throughout the city that is going to make this available to 9,000 places.
Very impressive.
Yeah, I was impressed if that happens now. I mean, that's just what I was told at that meeting, so I don't know if that's reality. We'll have to wait and see after July if that's in fact what they're going to do.
That would be very impressive.
That's not what Frontier though, is it? It's city now. And so Frontier's main office is 1 block down the street. That's where they're rolling it out from, and it's
Mhm.
all fiber, no copper. It was all fiber, so it's.
Yeah, I think it'd be pretty difficult to get a gig speed on copper, frankly.
Exactly, would be all fiber.
City manager, question.
I don't know if this would be more of a question for you or for the state auditor, but if all the Frontier and City Net are doing their thing to provide service, I look at broadband as, well, can we use the money to create a broadband network here downtown to offer to small businesses, a free internet service for small businesses, and to help us, eventually, we're gonna start putting cameras out to protect our public assets as far as parking garage, parking lot, things like that, and we can run those off of broadband, that was told versus hardwire. Could we use the money that we're getting right now for that? To start putting a broadband project together in downtown Clarksburg?
I'm going to try to make a distinction here. I mean, the questions you're asking is a very astute question, but you have to be very careful about how we define some things. You mentioned hardwired. Okay, well, fiber is always going to be hardwired.
Right.
Okay? Now, if you put that, if you were to build your own fiber and you put that on a circuit, you know, you went from point to point to point to point back to some place where you monitored that, that really wouldn't be broadband.
Right, that would cost us a lot of money versus if we set up a broadband network here at City Hall, I guess put the towers up on City Hall or whatever, we can do a broadband, supply broadband downtown.
Oh, so you want to do a broadcast? You want to do a Wi-Fi? Is that what you're saying?
Yeah,
You want to do a public Wi-Fi?
yeah, for downtown, that way we can at least provide maybe a free service to, internet service to businesses to attract businesses and tenants downtown.
I'm going to guess the Treasury would have to clarify those rules for you. And here's why I say that. If you're building broadband, even if it's free, and downtown is already covered 25 by 3, I think you have a pretty steep hill to climb to make that distinction and to use the federal funds to do that. But I'm not an expert on the Treasury's rules because the Treasury's rules are not final. I haven't had time to read all of them yet. So I would say that probably the auditor's office or Treasury would be where you would want to be. And that doesn't say you couldn't apply for some sort of an exemption if you're doing a public Wi-Fi network. And even if you did want to put up public Wi-Fi, that doesn't mean that you couldn't procure that Wi-Fi from someone else to put that on those towers, put those on those broadcast facilities for you.
What about, I don't know if this is towards you, but I'm just thinking, if it's private entities, private companies are coming in to do the broadband, if we could lease our public space for those towers, are there going to be, are there towers, or little boxes, I see them go on telephone poles, things like
Yeah,
that?
lots of
You know, I wonder if we could lease, make some revenue off of that.
Well, if you own towers,
Yeah, we do own one tower, I believe.
We got one up on that, so, yeah.
okay, if you own towers, there's always somebody looking for tower space. If you're looking for other transmission facilities on city property, if somebody wanted to do 5G, for example, and attach them to your light poles or to a city building or a city garage or something like that, on the towers, I think you're free to do with those, whatever your safety things tell you that you can do with that. If you're going to put Wi-Fi on utility poles or light poles that are owned by the city, there was a bill passed, I think 2 sessions ago, that was an AT&T bill that sets the rates and the terms and the conditions for leasing that space. I apologize, I don't remember the bill number, but I do know that did pass.
Other questions?
Are there any other municipalities that are looking into creating broadband?
Yes.
You know of?
Yes. I can tell you that the city of South Charleston presently has a project underway. They are building their own fiber, and they are going to make that an open access fiber that carriers can lease and use. And I believe the city is going to be providing some services as well. And I believe that the city of Huntington has in mind that they want to build what they call a smart city, and they want to deploy fiber to the home and to the premise every place in the Huntington city limits. Those are the only 2 that I'm aware of at the moment. I know that Putnam County also has a project that they're anxious to launch, which would take fiber to the premises for everyone and everything in the county. And that also would be an open access network. They'll build the network, and carriers can come and provide their services on the publicly owned facilities.
So so the city builds a network, and then they lease it out to the carrier then?
Multiple providers. It's not an exclusive arrangement.
That's a revenue source for that municipality, that's correct?
It is.
So I'm kind of analogizing this to back in the 80s, when you kept getting these calls for switching to long distance service.
Mm-hmm.
So we might have Sprint, somebody else might have AT&T or whatever, but it's going through the same phone lines.
Mm-hmm.
So is that kind of an analogous situation?
It is.
where we have
Yeah.
maybe Frontier and Spectrum, who knows who else, maybe going through the same fiber?
Actually, it is. There are a couple of cities across the country, probably at least a dozen who have already built and are running this kind of a network. And the customers are able to pull up a website and jump from one carrier to another with just a mouse click or two.
So that will create competition.
It does indeed create competition, yes.
It sounds like maybe, you know, if the city goes that direction, looking at the open network may be the way to go, so.
You're going to struggle finding federal funding to build that. You're going to probably have to do that on your own dime. But there are a number of cities who have done it.
So, so that would mean that, you couldn't, for example, use, because there's different, you can talk about different buckets of money.
Mhm.
There's the one bucket that's coming directly to the city, and essentially, we just have to account to the feds for what we did with it, within the rules that Treasury has set up.
Within the rules.
And, so what you're saying is that you don't believe that that would be within the Treasury rules for that money?
I do not. Because you've already got 25/3 service. Now, to your point, you might challenge whether or not you do or you don't, but if you do, then that money's not going to be eligible for that project, and I would urge you to contact the auditor's office if you have any questions about that.
But if we didn't have the 25/3 service, then we possibly could use the money for that.
Well, I'm sure you could. If, you know, to take it to the extreme, if you were any town USA and you had no broadband at all, no challenges of any kind, and this federal money came your way and you wanted to use it for broadband, I think you could pretty much do whatever you chose to do with it because you have absolutely nothing. You're completely unserved at every level.
All right, well, that means if, you know, if council decides they wants to go in that direction in the future, then that may be something that they'll just have to find out, you know, what the service level is and where they might want to challenge if we really have 25/3, because, as you said, the experienced people on the ground does not bear out that they're getting the speeds that are advertised, so.
Yeah, I think under any circumstances, you would probably face a challenge from the incumbent carrier, whoever is there is probably going to challenge that. But that, I don't mean to be callous about this, but you know, that's going to be your burden of proof.
Other questions?
Could we piggyback the broadband carriers that are in the area now? Is that a possibility? You know, we're getting, what, 6.4 million change monies. I'm saying there's going to be a competition between the carriers that are out there now, Frontier, CityNet, and Spectrum.
Well, what we call the wireline carrier, the Frontiers of the world, have the projects that they're doing, both from RDOF, from the Rural Digital Opportunity Fund money that's coming from the FCC. And you're not going to be able to build a competitive network in that area because federal funds are not going to be available to do that. If you're asking me if you could use that money to incentivize a cable carrier, for example, or a wireline carrier, either one, to extend their networks into unserved areas, the answer that I would give you today is probably, because what you would have extending into those unserved areas are people that don't have 25/3. So I think there's a good possibility that you could work some sort of an arrangement with them using that money. I'm not sure what the ownership level needs to be in a situation like that. Typically, when you use this is typically when you use that kind of grant money, the grant recipient is going to be the city, not the carrier, and the city has to retain ownership. Again, I don't know all the rules on this issue with Treasury, but that's a typical scenario.
Other questions? All right. Thank you very much for coming here today, and I'm glad we were able to get this rescheduled, and I think you've given us some pretty good information to work with, at least as a starting point. And like I said, we'll see. We're having the city election next week, and we'll see what the next council decides to do. But at least I wanted to get this out here so that we have something to think about.
Well, thank you for the invitation, Mayor. I'm happy to come up here this evening and meet with you folks and provide some guidance where I'm able. And I'm not in a great big hurry to get out of here, so if you have some questions you'd like to ask informally, I'd be happy to stay around for a bit. Okay? Thank you very much.
Yeah.